The thing I always do is I always set a periodization model first, and then I set reps. Because once I decide those two things, the remaining parts of the program become considerably easier.
We know that the shoulder provides mobility as opposed to more of the stability side.
You know that. What is going to be the biggest thing standing in clients' way from actually getting those results and doing that? We all know kind of how to get that. But getting a client to do it is the hardest thing. And if you have a working knowledge of anatomy, it doesn't matter where you are, what equipment you've got available, or what gym you're at, you'll find a way to make something work. Who are the people that I am currently coaching or that I want to coach, and what is some of the fundamentals I need to have in place to make sure my training and my nutrition is geared up to kind of those people. Just quickly before we get into the full show, for any of you who's watched this podcast before, you will know that I am super passionate about this podcast and getting on the most interesting guests to help you get better results with your fat loss, your business, your life, and your coaching skills. But at the moment, 85% of you who watch this channel aren't subscribed to the channel. The bigger the channel gets, the better the guests get, the more high production value the show gets, as well as the clips get. So if you're watching this, please, can you click subscribe, like, comment, improve interaction so YouTube know we are a channel to be reckoned with. And then we can take over, and then I'm coming for you, Joe Rogan. So we decided to do something a bit different today and flip the script a little bit. And before we hand over to you and talk a little bit question about my system and what I'm looking at bringing to the market, we wanted to discuss the importance of having a system as a coach and having a framework to build upon. And I just wanted to ask you a little bit, because you were someone that always, you clicked with this a lot earlier than I did. And when we started working together, you were always very sort of regimented. You had a way you approach things, and then you built your program up on top of that. For you, what was it that defined how you worked as a coach, and when did it start to click for you?
Well, a lot of it's to do with personality traits, I think. Like, I'm quite competitive and I like to be the best. So whether that's a room full of trainers or the client knowing that you're the best, I like to strive for that level of perception at least, you know what I mean? Because I know I'm really not going to be the best. There's a lot of well-known coaches who we don't even know, right? And that don't do blogging, social media posting and shit like that. But I think it's just myself, my personality, competitive, like I said. And I've always been around sport, right? And as we've discussed before, I mean, when you're in a changing room, you know what I mean? You've got to stand up, speak up when it's needed, pull together as a team. And, you know what I mean? Sometimes you can't hide, right? You know, so, yeah, just being around people that are other leaders and trying to be like that, I suppose, really.
You see a lot of coaches, so I find this is one of the problems with the education space. And I was certainly one of these coaches for a very, very long time. Trainers sort of like, they know how to train themselves and they just get knowledge. There's this big knowledge dump. And a lot of courses perpetuate this. It's just information for information's sake with no structure, no application, and nothing. And you see very, very smart trainers that really don't know how to put this into practice on the gym floor. And I think it's because they don't have a way of working. They try and sort of do everything. They go to a course and then all of a sudden the whole system has changed because it's new and they don't have a framework. So like, how did you start to begin having a framework? Because you've always, ever since I've known you, you've always worked in a very similar way. If I look at where you are 5-10 years ago to where you are now, it's an evolution of the same sort of coaching style. You've not changed your coaching style. You've layered on top of it. So what do you think allowed you to sort of be, I'd say, confident enough to stick to your guns on something rather than sort of doubt yourself and try and, you know, find it?
You know what, Si? Like, no one ever told me this. I just sort of had the idea that everyone should be entitled to being pain-free. And everyone can be good at movement and be good movers. So they're two things that I always try and implement for anyone I work with, whether that's a fucking 80-year-old woman who has really bad bone disease or whatever, you know what I mean, bad health status, or a spring chicken 11-year-old swimmer, you know what I mean, who's trying to compete at the highest level he can. I want everyone to be pain-free and I want everyone to move well. So that's my idea. That's my philosophy. how I get them there and how we achieve that, I use all the methods and philosophies of other people. You know what I mean? All the courses and workshops that I've attended, all the skill that I've learned, I try and apply, and then trial and error. You know what I mean? Trial and error.
But I suppose you can't use every bit of information you've had from every single course, right?
Yeah.
And when you look at that, what your sort of framework that you gave in there, so on being moving well, pain-free, this sort of stuff, from that, you could look at ATG guys that talk sort of full range of motion, astergrass, split squats, right? Big range of motion stuff, the Poliquin style stuff, essentially, right? You could talk Postural Restoration Institute stuff, that is sort of like structure and like correcting anterior pelvic tilt and kyphosis. You could look at the muscle mechanics crowd, like we talked about the other week, talking about sort of active range of motion and sort of resistance profiles and strength profiles. And I'm sure you do take bits of all of these, but they are all very, very different approaches.
Yeah.
So you had to, you must have had at some point a filtering system or way of filtering knowledge and going, this is what I'm going to focus on and this is what I'm going to disregard, which is something that I think a lot of coaches struggle with. They have almost information overload, paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
Like, how did you avoid that?
I think like I have done a lot of workshops and courses, and I've trained for different goals personally, and I've trained with a lot of different people. You know what I mean? I've trained with yourself. I've trained with weightlifters, bodybuilders, powerlifters. I've trained with like football players and all different types of people that like weightlifting and, you know, FRC or whatever, you know what I mean? And always picked their brains and tried different methods. But like I said about pain-free movement and good movement, the other sort of stuff I always make sure I want my athletes and clients to have is they always got to have fun. And my perception of, you know, doing FRC work, if anyone doesn't know, functional range conditioning, sort of slow movements for 60 minutes is very fucking boring. So I might spend 5 minutes doing it. And then what else?
So give me an example of an FRC movement for people who don't know what you're talking about. Well,
you know, you might do cars, yeah, shoulder cars. If someone has, you know, trouble reaching end ranges of motion, controlled articulation rotations or something like that, yeah, where you might just do real smooth, controlled rotations in this plane if you're watching me here, yeah, and then back around the other way. Great for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighters, great for elderly population who may have, or anyone who has like frozen shoulder and shit like that. Some people who push that stuff, they do it for half an hour to 60 minutes. I may just take that for 5-10 minutes, put it in a warm-up or a cool-down, give it as homework, and then we're using that as part of their training. But it's not the bulk of their training because to me and to the client, it's not fun. So fun is a big one, yeah? What's bang for your buck? What's fun? What's effective?
And how do you find what is fun? Because obviously that is very subjective.
It's client personality, right? You know what I mean? Like if you get someone in who has trained for 10 years, who's a male, 30 to 40 years old, they love lifting heavy shit, they love training hard, they ain't going to be down to do FRC for 30 minutes. Or they're not going to be down to maybe do they might not want to do a Poliquin style structural balance workout. That is very effective, but it's light weights, lots of rotator cuff work, lots of scapular work for 45 minutes. They're not going to do it. They're going to be bored out of their ass, and it's not going to be that effective long term because they're going to get bored and not do it. You know what I mean? So it's a balance of learning the client personality, I think, in my opinion, and then applying the strategy that you think is best for them. You know what I mean?
Were you ever kind of like go to those things though? Let's say someone's like, is the thing that is limiting somebody is they are so overdeveloped because of the hard training that you do need to really pull back. Yeah. Do you ever go that way for a short period of time?
Yeah, certainly. And like, obviously, as we always say, it's our job to teach and educate the client. Right? If they're not doing something, it's our fault. We're not teaching them properly. But, you know, if they're coming to see me 1 to 3 times a week, there's a lot of other hours of the week that they can implement that stuff as well. You know what I mean? So I will delve into it, but sometimes not straight away. I might have to, you know, build their trust first.
The thing I always find, though, I think sometimes the problem with like, because what you're saying there is very client defined, right? So if you have somebody who, let's say, you're saying that you're basing around what is fun, and you've got that pain-free, moving well, that sort of stuff, right? Now, that would potentially, the way it seems here, that would look different for every single person that comes in the door, which in a way it should do, right? Our program should be client-defined. But I think where a lot of overwhelm often comes in with trainers is that like they're trying to start from a blank piece of paper because every single set, every rep, every exercise, every movement should be completely 100% personal to the individual. And they just start with like, where on earth do I start with this? So you must, I presume, have some non-negotiables, some sort of template, some sort of structure that is like loosely there with 70, 80% of your clients that you then adjust. So is that sort of like underpinning foundation that you build upon with your clients? So how do you then stop it being such an overwhelming task every time you have a new client, especially if you get really busy?
Well, there's a few things we look at, right? Obviously, as coaches and good, highly skilled coaches who get results, we look at their biological age. We look at their training age, which is how long have they actually been training properly for. We look at, obviously, their goals, their injuries, their niggles, and we measure and we test. So we take physiological tests, we take blood pressure tests, we take resting heart rate tests, we may take active, passive range of motion tests, we may do muscular endurance, cardiovascular tests. We test, right, so that we don't guess. And then we apply a simple strategy, a simple program, depending on how many times a week they can train. And if it doesn't work or it gets boring for the client, then we make tweaks and changes, subtle tweaks and changes. And then we just keep going with that and build on it, because every training session, every exercise is a test anyway, right? That's kind of how I do it. Like, you know, I don't have no firm approach in how I program and how I prescribe exercises. I love the meat and potatoes. You know, I love the presses. I love the pulls. We always got to do more pulls and posterior chain and hip work. Always. Everyone has to do it. Everyone has to split squat more most of the time. Everyone has to do more bracing, breathing work. There are thousands of exercises, millions of exercises. There's not one that is wrong. There's just the ones that you enjoy to do, the client can do and enjoys doing. And then you just fine tune and build trust and get fancy as we go. You know what I mean? That's how I think of it, you know?
Do you start with a template at all?
Sorry?
Do you ever start with a template?
My template is generally, it's always unilateral work. It's always unilateral work. That's kind of my template, you know?
Why?
It's unilateral work, and it's whole body work.
Why unilateral and why whole body?
Well,
for people who are trainers that might not know.
Yeah, so unilateral work to balance out the limbs, balance out the left side, the right side. You get people in, they squat, deadlift too much, or don't weight train. They're always going to have limb discrepancies. Me and you train all the time. We probably still have limb discrepancies.
I 100% do.
Yeah. So unilateral work is always a must. You know what I mean? It's always important. It's always good to use it once or twice a year as a focus over a training block. You know what I mean? For at least 4 to 12 weeks, unilateral work as the primary focus to balance out the body, balance out the shoulders, the triceps, the biceps, not just the pecs and the quads. You know what I mean? There's so many small muscles there that you can try and balance out that will help bigger muscle groups.
Do you do unilateral with pressing? Do you do unilateral with pressing? Because the thing I always find with unilateral presses is that there's an element of stability here that potentially could do not more harm than good. There's benefits to that, but like you lose a lot. You don't do that with a split squat or a step up in the same way.
Well, we'll use a lot of dumbbells. Yeah, like dumbbell presses, like both at the same time. Like that could be considered unilateral, right? Because you're using dumbbells. But we can take that further and purely go unilateral and do the McGill dumbbell press, where we. Are you familiar with the McGill dumbbell press?
I'm not, no.
Great exercise. Dumbbell on one side. You're going to do a normal press, except you're going to lay your back on the bench flat and your spine is going to be on the edge of the bench. So we've got one side of the body on the bench and one side off the bench and the foot on the floor. Squeeze that glute that's hovering.
Like a hip thrust position. Like you're pressing from a hip thrust position.
Yeah, but if the bench is... You're laying on the bench, not like a hip thrust position. You're laying vertically along the bench.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I get what you mean.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get what you mean.
Glute tight, hand on the opposite hip, press. So now you're working unilaterally, but you're having to use this whole rotational sling and glute to stabilize and stop you rotating off the bench, right? It's a great exercise.
I imagine supersetting that with like a single arm low cable row in like a sort of like a 3-point stance would be excellent as well, because you're then also using the sling with the lat with the opposing glute, and then you're still challenging rotation, but from a different plane. I think that'd be a really good sort of structural balance kind of superset.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and for someone who like is a complete beginner, that's probably too advanced. But for someone who, for someone who is beginner to intermediate, that could be a great introduction to their training. For structural balance and fun. You know what I mean? Like.
So when it comes to beginners, is there any rules of thumb that you generally have with beginners? It's like I know we can't really put blanket statements. The term is personal training, but there are blanket statements you can almost put. So what's your kind of thought process when complete gym beginners? Because most of our coaches listening to this will be working with a lot of beginners.
The two things I always want my beginners to do and control and be really focused on is tempo. And I will also, like, with tempo, I mean speed of movement and control. Yeah, like skill acquisition. Like if I provide the tempo, try your best to maintain it, your speed. All right. Now, it ain't going to be perfect for a beginner because they're still learning the skill. But if we can focus on the skill, the speed, the tempo, the quality of movement goes up. All right. All right. That's a must. If it's all over the place and it's messy, then I'm going to regress them.
Yeah.
All right. That's the simplest way to regress someone because they're uncontrolled, right? If they can't stick to the speed, then that's the first one. So I'm looking for, if you want to say it's tempo or speed or movement skill, that's the first thing I want to do. Make sure everyone moves well with tempo and good speed. The second one is to control the rest periods. I always get my guys to control their rest periods. So, if we're looking for a, if we're seeking hormonal changes, whether that's for fat loss or building muscle, keep the rest periods short and let's try and stick to incomplete rest periods. If we need more time to recover because the skill isn't great and we're lifting heavy loads, then let's give them a bit longer to recover. They're my two things that I try and focus on in the first beginner phase of training.
I agree with that, especially the tempo. I remember a great phrase that stuck with me from Ben Pekulski was you earn the right to go quickly. Like if I'm left-handed, right, and if I was going to sign my name in my right hand, I wouldn't go quick. I'd go slow and purposeful because my nervous system hasn't adapted to it. Like you slow it down until you can be efficient in speed. And I think that's really important. I think that's the sort of thing I was sort of getting at, right? Like I think how do we make coaches' decision-making processes easier? And that is like, right, let's look at the 80-90% of the demographic that you're going to have. Are there general rules that can start you off? Like for me, I agree with you. The thing I always do is I always set a periodization model first and then I set reps. Because once I decide those two things, the remaining parts of the program become considerably easier. So let's say, we've spoken about this before, right? But let's say I'm having a beginner and I quite like a linear periodization model. We've spoken about this in the fat loss podcast. I know I'm going to start relatively high in reps and I'm going to work down over the training block. Now, because I'm doing 12 to 15 reps, I'm not going to do 8 sets. I'm not going to do 5-minute rest periods. That makes no sense. I'm not going to do like 8-second eccentrics when I'm doing 12 to 15 reps. So now everything else becomes easier in my program design. And I think that's some of those things there. It's like, okay, what is the general rule of thumb where you can have 90% of your program written and then you can be creative in the little things that we spoke about? Like, do I have a McGill press into a single arm low cable row? That would work really well for this client. But you can't think like that. You can't get into the exciting bit of the nitty gritty if you've got a blank page and you're like, where on earth do I start? And as you said, there is a million exercises, right? The difference between me choosing a leg press and me choosing a back squat could be easier if I've chosen the rep range first. Because now if I'm doing 15 to 20 repetition ranges, I probably am not choosing the back squat. I'm probably choosing a hack or a leg press. If I'm doing a unilateral exercise, I'm probably not going to necessarily do that at 20 rep sets. Yeah. So having that overarching decision makes everything easier. You've taken 1,000,000 exercises and put them to 1,000 exercises, and then you've chosen a movement pattern that I need to hit, then I can go, okay, there's 100 exercises. Cool, which one of these am I going to have? It's so much easier, and I think so much more enjoyable, because you can actually start to get into the little things that make a big difference, rather than wasting time doing the same thing in every single program and rewriting it over and over and over and over again.
Yeah. And that's where, prior to exercise selection, your testing and your sort of profiling of the client is so important, because, you might want to do a split squat because it's a fantastic exercise for most people. However, if they have, they might have really severe scoliosis, and that might be the best thing for them, because it might aggravate something in their lower back, for example. I've had a client like that, for example, So you need to test everyone.
When it comes to assessments and testing, because this is another minefield that coaches can go down and get lost in. Now, I know you're quite skilled in terms of you've done a lot of courses and done a lot of things on the assessments, and I've done a fair bit of manual therapy work, and I can literally assess end range motion and things like this. If you've got a client that's trainer that's relatively new to this, listen to this, and wants to have a basic structure of what's the important things to assess. When you get a new client, take away all your years of experience and all the fancy stuff you might do, like muscle testing and things like this. What is the bare bones structure of, if you did this and you looked at this, you would learn the majority of information you need, and what are the key things you're looking to get from an assessment?
So I would break the body down into 3 areas. I would do the shoulders, and in the shoulders, we could look at the neck and head as well. But the shoulder joint, I would look at the hips, and lastly, I would look at the lower limb, the ankles. All right, those 3 that I would look at first. Now, this isn't my template for testing, but if I was to recommend, this is what I would recommend. Look at the shoulders, look at the hips, lower back as well, and then look at the ankles. I think if you can work out testing, do some testing for the shoulders and those areas, then I think you can really work a good, nice template and a program going forward. For example, we know that the shoulder provides mobility as opposed to more of the stability side, right? So do they have passive, active range of motion in the shoulder? If not, why not? How can we address it? How do
you test that? Because there's coaches that might not know how to test that. We do.
So I will do range of motion testing. I'll lay someone on the floor. We'll do an overhead reach, test the internal rotators and external rotators of the shoulder. How tight are they? Turn the palms, go the other way. We may do, can they touch the same scapula on one side? Can they touch the opposite scapula around the back? How about their subscapularis? Put the hand on the lower back. Can they pull their hand away? Some simple testing that people can do. If we look at the hips, I love doing the CLAT test. I love doing the Thomas test. The Thomas test will assess anterior hip and rec fem. So mostly the psoas and so the hip flexors, the psoas and rec fem. That can tell you a lot about someone who has tight quads. However, most people usually fail that anyway, abysmally.
The problem I find with that, though, and again, this is without going down a wormhole of anatomy and mechanics, it's not a problem with the Thomas test. It's a problem with how people interpret the Thomas test.
Yeah.
If I see another person going at blaming the psoas for why their hips are tight, I will scream.
Yeah.
Most people, not all, but most people will have some level of anterior tilt and lumbar lordosis coming in that have tight hips, right?
Yeah.
If you look at the anatomy, this is the reason why people say hamstrings are tight. Hamstrings and psoas are never tight. They are weak as fuck and they're over lengthened. If you think of the psoas attaching onto the spine, going into the femur, they're going to be pulling in different directions and it's going to be over lengthened. You need to strengthen the psoas and maybe lengthen the rec fem. And this is why I really like split squats, because it does both of those things.
Yeah. I agree with you. And I actually think the biggest issue for knee and lower back pain is actually the rec fem.
Oh, 100%. Certainly the knee, because it's the thing that crosses the knee and the hip.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's normally the rec fem. I find that if there's a muscle that is restricted, it's normally the rec fem. Yeah.
Rec fem is restricted. Hamstrings are weak, and the psoas is weak. So if you can sort out those three, I would say 9 times out of 10, your knee pain goes away. There's an element of bracing here. We can also look at the foot, but that goes down a wormhole. But I would say that was where I would look first with knee pain. If that would sort out 80% of the time, and then I would look out, bracing, foot.
Yeah.
But I think most things start at the hip and the rib cage.
Yeah.
That's why I kind of agree with the PRI type approach, because even though somebody might not be able to change it, I can't look at an X-ray. You said you use an example of your client with scoliosis, right? Right. You even though you might not be able to change that, you're not necessarily going to correct their scoliosis. Although there are people that are scoliosis affected by musculature and structure, but if you're structurally scoliotic, you ain't going to change a damn thing, and you have to work around. And that's where sort of the muscle mechanics we were talking about crowd come in and are really good at doing that. But I do think, your ability, your line of pull and ability for muscles, whether you change it or not, structure dictates function.
Yeah.
Your job now is to work out whether it's something you can do about it or not. And I feel that sometimes coaches waste time trying to fix stuff.
Yeah.
Do I have the ability to help somebody's knee pain? 100%. Is it in my scope of practice to do that directly? No. So my job is to come in and help them get strong where I can. But if they have pain, they should go and see an osteo and go and see a physio, and I will help. But I don't consider myself the be-all and end-all here. And I think too many coaches do. They waste time trying to get people into the perfect movement and be a physio, and they're doing Peterson step-ups, and the client came in to do fat loss.
Yeah, totally. So do you want to, we'll go on to a bit about what you're doing at the moment and what's taking up a lot of your time. The coach's course.
16-week coaching confidence, So launching a 16-week coaching confidence course, hopefully within the next couple of weeks. Content's pretty much written. And essentially the aim of this is, it's twofold. There's a, I don't want to say selfish, but I feel that I'm in a better position to help coaches now, certainly on a larger scale than I am the general public. I've gotten results with thousands of clients, but when Instagram is an attention game, and I'm competing with an ex-lawyer who used to be fat that has all these abilities to speak to the pain points, and when someone's signed up with me, I can be brilliant with them. But I understand the coach. I understand the problems. I've gone through a lot of the problems. I'm the ungifted athlete that wanted to be in shape and then turned that into a job because he didn't know what else to do with his life, and then fell in love with it. I understand the struggles that come with that more. But I think that when I look at the education projects, and I've been, as you know, running education for some of the world's leading personal training gyms for probably about 6-7 years of actually doing education and mentoring trainers and things like this. The big gap I see in the education space these days is that there's a lot of people, I'm not calling anyone out here, but there's a lot of people trying to show they have the biggest dick in the industry. Big words and information dumps and courses that is 15 weeks of deep theory and 1 week of application. And it leaves, as we spoke about earlier on, trainers leaving courses, applying nothing, completely confused, having no framework to actually layer on information, and just being completely lost and just becoming a bit of money that they try and justify to themselves for why they've spent so much money, because they don't want to feel like it was a waste of money. And they're never going to take anything from it. And I was that coach for so many years doing courses because someone in my gym did it, or I thought it would help me, or I wanted to go down this route and I didn't know why I wanted to go down this route. So the thing I wanted to make sure that happens is that I can arm coaches with enough knowledge to allow them to be confident in a decision-making process. And that only happens if we underpin it with application. So the difference I have is that a lot of courses will say they'll put the application bit at the end. You won't give any tools to start tomorrow. I'm a huge rugby fan, and Clive Woodward, the England rugby coach in 2003, had this thing where he provided everything he could for his players. He got them 5-star hotels, he got them psychologists, he got them everything that make this a luxurious experience for those players. So he had no excuse but to just do the work. And it's always stuck with me. And I thought, well, okay, how about I give trainers pre-written programs that they can just start tomorrow. They don't need to understand the whys right now, but they need to get started doing them. I can give them meal plans that are relatively automated, so the clients are always set up in the right way. They've just got to choose foods that fit the client. And what that allows people to do is that from day one upon starting my course, hopefully they will be able to change the way and then get better results for the clients right away. And then when we go into the education part and the live calls, rather than just being knowledge and you go, where on earth do I apply this? It's referencing back to the stuff that they're doing. It's referencing back to the templates. Oh, that's why Simon put that exercise in there. That's why that meal plan works this way. That's why, he made a change this way. And so that's part two. And the part two in the education product, part one is the templates and the systems. Part two is the education content, 16 weeks of educational content, teaching everything from training to nutrition to recovery, to a little bit of client management at the end. But that's all very much underpinned in things that can be applied. So week one is psychology and understanding how to communicate. You can apply that straight away. Week two is learning your system. And this is like what we're talking about in this episode is that system. I have a system that works for me, but I will teach you mine, but I want to start you developing yours. If you work with athletes, you're going to work slightly differently and have different sort of framing and different sort of like commonalities like we've spoke about with beginner clients. Then I will, then somebody else will. So week two, we find your system. And now you've found your system and now you've got templates, you can then start to understand and learn. When I give you an anatomy, you can go, where does that fit into my model? Rather than just being knowledge for knowledge sake. And then part three of the course is one-to-one mentoring. I think this is something that we get one-to-one mentoring in almost everything else. Our clients are getting one-to-one mentored. But yet in the education space, unless you pay really crazy money for a mentor personally one-to-one, you pay these massive consult fees, your access to coaches to help you, unless you work for a company that provides a mentor, is limited. So we have a way of looking over all your clients and working with you to help you get better client results. So our aim is that at the end of the program, you to have more results than when you went into it. And that is my goal.
Yeah, no, brilliant. That sounds good. So why did you, why confidence? Why confidence coaching? Like what's the backstory to that? Like, why did you choose that word to define the name?
I think imposter syndrome is something that is I've never been in any other industry, but I just know it's a huge problem in the industry, both from a position that coaches are comparing themselves to others, and I did for years, and I still do. And I started to realize recently that if I get a result and I put it up on social media, I'm very much and as I should, this client did well, this client nailed it, well done to this client. And then I'll see another coach who puts up a result, and I'll go, what did they do? Why didn't I get that result? There's no difference, but I put their result more on a pedestal than my own, and I give credit to the coach, where I give no credit to me when I do that. Right? So then we've got a lot of coaches that are now trying and comparing themselves to other people on social media. We've got a lot of coaches that are overwhelmed. We've got a lot of coaches that are burnt out. We've got a lot of coaches that just lack the confidence in their products, that feel that they're rubbish compared to these highlight reels on social media. And by the way, so many coaches are full of shit. I've worked with some people that give it the big I am on social media and haven't got a fucking clue. And they are literally, their response times are like 2 weeks. Right? And they talk about customer service, right? This is way too common in our industry because of the barriers to entry in terms of getting becoming a personal trainer. So I think there's that, and there's also, I think, imposter syndrome is going to be a word that keeps coming up because I don't think it's a bad thing. But it's a bad thing if you tell yourself it's a bad thing and you create that narrative. Yeah. So my aim is to create a narrative of like, I had a coach, shout out, Ryan Anderson, coach as well, really good coach. And he asked when it clicked for me and a few of the coaches I used to work with, when did it click for you that you could get a result with everyone who walked in the door? And everyone said, this was what made it click, and this was all. And I went, for me, it hasn't. And at times in my life, that has been a negative, that has held me back, that I've never felt truly like I've made it or confident. But I also know that, where I do have confidence, that I am a more knowledgeable coach than those people. Now, why is that? It's because there's that little bit of uncertainty. There's that little bit of imposter syndrome. If I didn't have that, I'd rest on my laurels. If I didn't have that, I'd get complacent. So it's reframing that, harnessing that, and then pushing that forward to the point where you have a framework. Because I think when it comes to how do you improve someone's confidence and not lose that sort of drive and that desire to be better, it's cutting down the decisions. A lot of people now, as the buzzword in the fitness industry, to talk about decision fatigue. How do we minimize decision fatigue with our fat loss clients because they're busy and things like this? Yet none of these coaches look inwards and think, how do I cut down decision fatigue with me? Why am I stressed? Why am I burnt out? I'm telling my clients this and I'm not practicing what I preach with it. So how do we streamline this process of getting clients results? How do we create a good template? How do we have a systems way of thinking? So we spoke about earlier on about how I think about program design. Periodization chooses reps decide the variables, right? Now, I look at, like, I have something called, that I teach in this course called the program design pillars. And it's like a paint by numbers. And you do the top one, periodization, second one, reps, third one is workout variables, sets, rest, tempo, etc., etc., etc. You know, and then we've got movement categories. Then we have like target areas, and then exercise progression, and then exercise standardization, right? If you haven't got anything to follow, if you're chaotic, it doesn't matter if you're progressing shit if you don't know how to write a big basic program. So for movement categories, moving down, well, okay, we're looking at, if I'm looking at a beginner client, I want, this is just an example, vertical pull, vertical push, horizontal pull, horizontal push, bilateral squat pattern, unilateral squat pattern, hip extension, knee flexion, right? 8 main movement patterns. Now, does every client have to do all 8? Absolutely not. But most beginners are going to need probably the majority of these 8. So if I get a beginner, I know from that thing that they're going to be their structural issues, before I go down a structural balance phase, they're probably just structurally unsound because they're weak everywhere. So my job is to give them as much of a variety of stimulus into all those movement patterns. Okay, cool. Now my exercise selection becomes easy. I've got 8 movements, right? And if I'm doing full body, I've got probably an A and a B series. Oh, look, there's my 8 movements on day 1 and day 2.
Yeah.
So now my decision-making process is like, oh, which one of these 17 million exercises am I choosing? Right, I've got a vertical pull. Right, what vertical pull am I choosing? Okay, what's my client's overhead range? Cool, I'm not going to do a chin-up. Fantastic, let's do a pull down and let's lean them back. Done. That took 10 seconds because I knew that rationale.
Yeah.
Right? This is a concept I got from Steph and Consult. We have very different systems, but the way Steph and Kilo Strength thinks, he has things like the 90-degree principle. He has that sort of, there's 24 reps overall across an A series set, like indicator lift, give or take. These guidelines give him a framework that makes his decision-making process easier. Now, I've just stripped that back a little bit further and given this for coaches to create the underpinning of their result. Once you have a system in place, you're not now worrying about every decision. You now have more mental headspace to develop your skills, be creative, work with your clients better, have some confidence, take some downtime, have a date night, and not just thinking about training and programming and messaging all the time.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose, obviously, you're very passionate about helping coaches, and you've got the experience and skill set to create a fantastic course and give it to people, which is what you're doing. And I'm excited to see it. It sounds like you're going to give a lot of structure to coaches to help them with their decision making, obviously, yeah, and how to apply good strategic programs, nutritional programs, and concepts, yeah, and make it their own. Give me 3 of the sort of obviously you got a 16-week course. Like, give me 3 areas, like the syllabus. Like, give me 3 areas that you're excited to present, teach, and why. Like, why are these 3 areas really important for coaches to level up and upskill in?
Ooh, that's super interesting. And I can definitely answer. Before I answer that, though, I will say this one more thing about confidence as well in terms of structure. Because I used to be this coach. When I was at Virgin Active, I was really wanting to get these jaw-dropping results that I saw on Instagram and saw from companies like, who do we have at the time when I was at Virgin Active? UP were probably the only game in town then, right? It was getting these amazing results. So I looked at these results, the ultimate performance we're doing, and obviously I've worked there for very many years and, got so much information from that place, like from incredible people that I worked with in that place. The people at City at the time I was there, amazing coaches. Now, I look at this where I was before, and I was just doing workouts, I was just pushing people hard, and I was sort of giving them generic advice, like, I don't know, eat some chicken. And like, I was banging my head against the wall going, why can't I get these results? And I wonder how many coaches now that can consider themselves fat loss coaches don't know how to set goals. How much weight should a client lose per week? How do I set targets for them? Do I know if my client's on track? Or am I just throwing stuff at the wall and hoping in 12 weeks he will look amazing? How can I actually control this tangible variable? Do I know if this person's behind? A lot of people don't. I didn't. And then that was a game changer for me when I learned how to set goals, because now I can actually troubleshoot. And it's very hard to be confident when you're just sort of hoping and having that framework. I know a lot of advanced coaches that don't do this well either. I know to lose X amount, this is going to take this amount of time, and you need to achieve this, and this translates to this work. That's much easier to have difficult conversations with clients. It's very difficult to make a client stick to the diet if they don't know why they're sticking to it. But going back to your question, 3 areas. 3 areas that I think coaches should understand.
So you have a 16-week course, and that covers all different topics and across that syllabus. Like, what are the 3 areas over the 16 weeks that you're excited to teach, and why do you think coaches will benefit from it? Why do you think it's important for them to level up and upskill in those 3 areas? What are they for you? What are you excited to teach?
Oh, there's a lot of things that I go into over the course of this. And to be honest, like, a lot of people think about, I'm just going to cop out and say training and nutrition. I generally think if you have a working knowledge of anatomy, if you have a good understanding of psychology and communication, and then probably either the system, I'm going to be a cop out and give 4, either the system one, or actually just the one-to-one mentoring in general, because that's something that no one does. So the reason why I think a good working knowledge of anatomy and a good working knowledge of psychology are the 2 most important skills for a coach. Psychology, like, everyone's going to say, well, nutrition's going to create get your fat loss results. It's super important. You need this for your health. But on the whole, is more nutrition knowledge going to help you become a better coach? 1000%. Is understanding hormones and issues going to make you a great coach? Yes. But for most people listening to this, their goal is to either get people leaner or get people more muscular, right? So we're looking calorie deficit, calorie surplus. We know that. What is going to be the biggest thing standing in clients' way from actually getting those results and doing that? We all know kind of how to get that. But getting a client to do it is the hardest thing.
Yeah.
So if you have an understanding of how to communicate well with clients, how to create buy-in within that initial session, and how to communicate with them, and how to keep them accountable, which is all within that psychology realm, your job in everything you do will be easier. And I think that's where, when I look at the hundreds of coaches I've mentored over the years, the coaches that do well and the coaches that struggle are the ones that do well are the ones with better communication skills. The ones that struggle with communication skills do worse, regardless of their training, nutrition, knowledge.
Yeah.
When it comes to a working knowledge of anatomy, people don't think anatomy is that important. I kind of disagree. And not for the reason you think. You don't need to know every bony landmark of the hip. But if you're people coming in, I want to grow my lats. If you don't know where your lats start and end, you don't know where the insert and originate, you don't know how to line up an exercise with it, you don't know how to effectively train it. And also, if we've learned anything from the last 2 years, is that you're never guaranteed anything. What happens if your gym is busy and you can't get on the lat pull down because it's the lat pull down part of the workout? What about if what happens if a pandemic happens and I've got to train outside? If you can't work on the fly and adjust, you're a bit screwed. And we saw loads of coaches over the last 2 years who didn't know what to do when their nice shiny leg press was taken away from them. And if you have a working knowledge of anatomy, you can. It doesn't matter where you are, or what equipment you've got available, or what gym you're at. You'll find a way to make something work.
Yeah.
So those are those 2 areas, and the system I'm looking forward to teach, because I think that'll be the biggest light bulb moment in the course for most coaches. This will be the first time a lot of coaches have actually thought about, what is my product? Not from a business perspective, but in terms of, who are the people that I am currently coaching or that I want to coach, and what is some of the fundamentals I need to have in place to make sure my training and my nutrition is geared up to kind of those people. So if you're working Gen Pop, you may want to go around about 10 to 12 calories per pound. You may look at more full body templates. You may look at some of the things I teach in my reset, rebuild, replenish system. But if you're working with football players in season, that's going to change. The calorie requirements are going to change because they're going to be more active. So I think when people start to look at these things, they'll have an ability now to filter information. They'll have ability to question information. And I include myself in this. I want every intake of this course to be slightly different. And if somebody learns from week 2 their system and wants to teach something on it, I will let them take a week. Cool. Because learning how to communicate is also very important to other coaches. So I think those are the 3 areas. And then the one-to-one mentoring is going to be a game changer for so many people, because it's the first time, not even for the first time they've had direct feedback with their client results, but how many coaches just go through the motions and then they're like, oh my God, 6 weeks gone past, I didn't even realize. Whereas if they are reliant on keeping this tracker of their spreadsheet of their clients up to date, they know, are they on track, yes or no, and each week they know what they need to do about it.
Yeah. Proper.
They will get better results from that alone because they'll be keeping themselves accountable.
Yeah. 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 It's almost like having a client do regular check-ins and daily weigh-ins if the goal is fat loss or whatever, like just more accountability and better results, right?
Absolutely.
So like, obviously you said earlier, like it's for coaches, like beginner coaches. Is it for anyone else? Like, is it for intermediate, advanced coaches? Will they learn from it? Like what, for everyone?
100%. I always think with every course, you'll take snippets. And I think sometimes for good coaches, it's good to look back. Some of the stuff that we'll go through, it will be stuff that's relatively basic for certain people, right? But it's good to refresh the basics every now and again.
All the time.
But it's also that the course isn't basic. I touch on topics like breathing and bracing mechanics. I talk through sort of like some of the PRI sort of posture restoration institute stuff. I talk mechanics. I talk thyroid. I talk sleep. I talk all this sort of stuff. There's also a client management section at the end of this course. And I don't necessarily consider myself the most productive and amazing organized coach in the world. But what I do think will help with a lot of coaches is that client management section at the end, because I'm someone with ADHD. I'm someone that a to-do list just won't cut it. I'm someone that if I don't have systems, my day gets chaotic. You can learn from people who struggle with stuff and have found ways to streamline their work. And I think that is something that's like everyone teaches client management or organization skills are people that are naturally organized. Now you can learn client management skills from someone that wants to try and do it in the most efficient way possible because it wasn't their initial skill set. And I think that will be a benefit to a lot of advanced coaches. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely anyone can do it. And bear in mind, advanced coaches still have the one-to-one access to me. Someone who's been in the industry 11 years, worked with the best personal training companies in the world, taught education for Asia, UK, worked with people in different countries, worked with millions of different client types, worked to help people with autoimmune conditions, help people with structural issues, help people with injuries get in shape, help people with emotional connection to food get in shape, help people with bulimia and anorexia get in shape. I've helped diabetics, I've helped vegans, right? So the more advanced coach, I may hold the hand of the newer coach to get the results. The more advanced coach has an hour where they can ask questions and we can go through their one client a month. And like, what other course offers that?
What I love about you is that like you've actually like you say, you've been in the trenches, but you've actually got results, and you showcase that on your social media, your website, everything you do, there's thousands of coaches that are trying to sell online products, online services, online coaching, but they're piss poor. They don't show any results. They never show any client testimonials or transformations or athletes or just general good, information on what they're actually doing in their practice. So there's a lot of charlatans out there, you know what I mean? And I can attest to you being a fantastic coach who gets results because I know you and I see what you do.
Appreciate that.
So for anyone that is listening, authority is one thing, like seeing business salesmen on socials, who have 1,000 followers plus, or coaches who have 50K followers and a few little results here and there, but are very present. They have authority, but man, make sure you see their results because they might have thousands of people going through the doors, but if they've only got, you know, a handful of results, then question where you're spending your money, because that's not the right place to be spending your money if you really want to be a good coach and upskill and make a difference to people's lives.
And longevity as well, right? Like, and this is something we can say for both of us, right?
Sure.
How many coaches leave the industry within 2-3 years? They could be great, but they burn out. And I've gone through periods of massive burnout, but I've still stuck in this 11 years later. Yeah,
I think like the turnover of coaches, personal trainers, sports scientists, strength and conditioning coaches, physios, I think it's a pretty high turnover, like especially personal trainers, like our field. It's a huge turnover. Like we know that people can qualify within a week or two or whatever. Anywhere across the world, you can qualify so fast, and you can pretty much walk into a gym and start coaching people instantaneously. However, the burnout rate is just as instantaneous, and the drop-off is huge. So, you know, I mean, the field is a very rewarding one financially, but you have to be good at what you do, and you have to not just love it, you have to be good at it. You know what I mean? People like you can provide good value. So, like,
fingers crossed.
Going forward, like, what are your goals with it? Like, how far do you want to take the course? Like, you know, is it going to be a global thing? Is it going to be, how big is it going to go? Like, where do you see it going? Like,
that's a good question. I mean, I don't know. I think it'll be a global thing in the sense that this is totally remote learning. Like, you could do this from anywhere in the world. You don't have to be here in Hong Kong. This is something for coaches at any place, right? So it will be global in that respect. But I certainly would like to, you know, sort of build this to something that having a good, like, I don't want to have huge numbers because I want to be able to give good quality to each individual, but like 15 to 20 people per intake. I want to try and get it to a point where I'm running 3 intakes per year of this. Then I'll start maybe working at level 2. And I'd love to do some in-person workshops. Like I'd like to take, I've got a dream of I want to do a TED Talk. I run education workshops for trainers twice a week. I would like to take that larger scale. I would like to see if I can get into some sort of gym chains. Anyone is an owner of a gym chain and would like me to come in, either if you're here in Hong Kong, I can do whatever you like. If you are in the UK, we can arrange when I come back next summer. But I'd love to work with some gyms and help their trainers and sort of do sort of that sort of contract work. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
You know, it almost sounds like your course, your 16-week course is going to be just like everything to be the best coach and to make money and to be like results driven. You know what I mean? It sounds like the gold standard personal training course is here. It's the confident coaching course. Like,
yeah, you know my aim is to do what the initial 6-week personal training courses should do, and also to be the bridge to, like, I don't consider Luke Lehman, Jordan Shallow, Michael Goulden, Nick Daniel, insert phenomenal educators in the space here. I don't consider these guys competition. I consider themselves collaborators. Not in the sense that they're going to come and collaborate on my course, but I consider myself the bridge to allow somebody to go through my course, get a good foundation of understanding of who they are as a coach, what their business does as a coach, what their practice is, and a good working knowledge of everything. And then if they go, I get to the end and it goes, oh, I want to do more of that anatomy stuff. And I'm happy to go, hey, look, my buddy Nick over here does a great course. Or my buddy Jordan does the prescript level 1. Go and do that because he's really smart. Jordan gets a coach that understands his course more in return for me bringing them up to that level. Yeah. So I feel myself, I'm the bridge to help coaches actually get more from these courses and also do what the main education providers are not doing.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds exciting, man, and I'm sure it'll be successful.
I fingers crossed. We'll see. It should be going live in maybe as early as next week, if not the week after. Just waiting.
Yeah, cool. So what, people can just start reaching out to you now and getting more information on it?
Yeah, at Kingsley Dutton on Instagram, and let me know. I post on there very, very regularly. I'm, relatively communicative in my DMs, so just drop me a message. Let me know. I mean, I'm not saying that you have to sign up on the course. If you want to ask a question, ask a question. If you want to get on a call and see if it's the right course for you, I'm happy to arrange that. If you want to go full steam ahead, burn the boat, and just go all in on your education, let me know and I'll send you a link.
Yeah, cool. Well, just to finish up, what I would want to see more from you now then is to see more educational content going up. Like, I want you to sell it to me, you know what I mean, as a friend and someone who always wants to upskill as well. Like, I want to see more of your stuff going up then, like education stuff, you know what I mean?
I've got a few things in the pipeline.
Yeah, cool. I look forward to it. I look forward to seeing it and then jumping, getting involved.
Well, mate, I appreciate that. It was good fun actually, being the other side of the coin. But we'll chat next week. We've decided we are going to ruffle some feathers next week, so stay tuned for that. And mate, thanks as always, and I'll speak to you next week.
Cheers, brother. Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching the podcast. If you're like me and like to binge watch podcast episodes, click here for our most recent episode. And if you enjoy the show and want to be updated when new videos come live, click here to subscribe to the channel.